You know that feeling when something just doesn't sit right, when all the numbers look too perfect? That was me last spring, sitting in a dull community meeting room, surrounded by fake smiles and overpriced snacks, listening to our HOA treasurer brag about how efficiently our money was being spent. At first I didn't care much. I mean, who actually wants to sit through an HOA budget meeting? But then Karen, our self-appointed neighborhood queen, took the mic. Karen wasn't just another board member, she was the board, the kind of person who treats a suburban neighborhood like her personal kingdom, enforcing lawn colors, mailbox designs, and apparently even how high your grass should grow before she sends you a friendly notice. So when she started flaunting the record surplus in this year's HOA finances, something inside me twitched. The numbers she quoted didn't match what I'd seen in the community emails. We'd had two major repairs that year, a full pool resurfacing and a new security gate system, both ridiculously expensive projects. Yet somehow, our budget had a surplus. Yeah, right. I remember watching her grin, all proud and smug, like she had single-handedly saved the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the actual auditor, a guy named Mr. Lanning, just nodded along beside her, flipping through a stack of papers that looked way too thin to be a real financial report. At that moment, something clicked. I wasn't just annoyed anymore, I was curious. That night, I logged into the resident portal to check the posted financials. Nothing. Just a one-page summary that looked like it had been made in Microsoft Word by a middle schooler. No itemized list, no receipts, no signatures, just a "trust us, everything's fine." And trust me, that's the one phrase you never want to hear from a Karen. So I started digging. Not illegally, of course. I'm not trying to end up on the evening news. But I do have a background in IT, and our HOA uses a pretty outdated system for file sharing. Let's just say it wasn't exactly Fort Knox. By the next evening, I had found something, a backup folder labeled Audit_Review. Inside were draft versions of the auditor's report. Multiple copies with red lines and comments. The earlier versions actually made sense. Expenses were higher, repairs were documented, and totals balanced. But then, in later versions, numbers started changing. Expenses disappeared, totals shrank, and Karen's surplus magically appeared out of thin air. And here's the wild part. The final version, the one the HOA published, had metadata showing it was last edited not by the auditor, but by Karen herself. Yeah, the woman who can't even program her garage remote had somehow edited an official financial audit. I wasn't sure what to do yet. If I just accused her, she'd play the victim card, talk about misunderstandings and community unity. But I needed proof that no one could argue with, and the more I looked, the more obvious it became. Karen had bribed the auditor to sign off on the fake report. Hidden in one of the drafts was an email attachment, a scanned note labeled Consulting Bonus Agreement. It was a payment invoice. $5,000 transferred from Karen's Community Improvement Fund to the auditor's consulting firm. That was the smoking gun. I just sat there staring at my screen, half in disbelief, half furious. I knew Karen was controlling, but this was next-level corruption. We're talking about stealing from hundreds of homeowners, people who trusted her with their money. Still, I didn't want to do something reckless. I needed to expose her in a way that was public, undeniable, and, if possible, a little bit poetic. Because if you've ever dealt with a Karen in power, you know that simple justice isn't enough. She has to feel it. So I started planning. The next community meeting was in 2 weeks. Karen would definitely show up, probably with her fancy binder and that smug smile she always wore when she thought she'd won. And that's when I decided. I wasn't going to confront her in private. I was going to broadcast the truth. I reached out to a friend who runs a local neighborhood livestream channel, the kind of guy who covers everything from lost pets to barbecue competitions. He owed me a favor, and when I told him what I had, his jaw practically hit the floor. We came up with a plan to stream the next HOA meeting live, publicly, for every homeowner to see. The goal? To show the original audit files side by side with the doctored ones, to let everyone hear the truth in real time. In the days that followed, I could feel the tension building. Karen must have sensed that people were starting to whisper. She began sending cheerful community update emails, suddenly talking about transparency and teamwork, which of course only made her sound more suspicious. And then came the day of the meeting. I remember setting up my laptop in the back of the room, acting casual, while the live stream quietly went online. Karen walked in wearing a bright red blazer, like she was about to accept an award. Her hair was perfectly done, her clipboard stacked with papers. The auditor sat beside her, looking nervous, and now that I knew the truth, I could see the guilt all over his face. As the meeting started, Karen launched into her usual speech about responsible spending and our thriving community. But I wasn't listening to her words. I was watching the chat window on my phone. Dozens of residents had already tuned into the live stream, and they were about to see something unforgettable. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. Karen gave me that fake smile, the one that always said, "Don't waste my time, dear." But I wasn't here to play by her rules anymore. I opened my laptop. On the projector behind her, I displayed two documents, the final audit report and the real draft version with the hidden comments and altered numbers. The room went silent. And just as Karen started to speak, I switched to the payment invoice, her signature right next to the $5,000 consulting bonus. For the first time, she didn't have words, and the auditor's face turned pale as paper. But that was only the beginning. Because what happened next, the reaction, the cover-up attempt, and the way the entire neighborhood turned on her, that would make the next chapter unforgettable. When I hit play on that slideshow and the real numbers appeared, it felt like the entire neighborhood held its breath. The silence in that HOA meeting room was deafening, like the moment before a thunderstorm hits. Karen's frozen smile slowly melted into something between panic and disbelief. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, back to the crowd, and then to the auditor beside her, who looked like he wished the floor would just swallow him whole. And then came the murmurs. Dozens of homeowners in that room, plus hundreds more watching online, started flooding the live stream chat with comments. "Wait, she changed the numbers? Is that her signature? Are you serious right now?" It was chaos, the kind of chaos that doesn't just expose someone, it embarrasses them in real time. Karen tried to speak, waving her hands like she was conducting an orchestra of excuses. Something about a misunderstanding, or a formatting issue, or that classic line every guilty person uses. This is being taken out of context. But the thing about the internet? It never forgets. Within minutes, the live stream had gone viral across local community groups. People were clipping segments, reposting screenshots, and tagging the county HOA oversight office. My phone was buzzing non-stop. Messages from neighbors who had once been too scared to speak up were now thanking me, cheering me on, and some sending me even more dirt on Karen. Apparently, this wasn't her first creative budgeting session. One neighbor sent proof that Karen had billed the HOA for community decorations, which turned out to be her personal Christmas lights. Another revealed she'd expensed a spa weekend as a board leadership retreat. And my personal favorite, an $800 charge labeled security enhancement, which was literally just a new Ring camera for her front porch. It was almost funny until you remembered this was our money. Hundreds of dollars in monthly dues meant for repairs and maintenance, all quietly funneled into Karen's little empire of control. The more I looked, the angrier I got. But anger wasn't enough. She still technically held her position as HOA president, and knowing Karen, she wasn't going to surrender her crown without a fight. Sure enough, by that evening, she had gone into full damage control mode. She sent out a long, dramatic email to every homeowner, accusing me of hacking into private HOA systems and spreading misinformation. She even CC'd a few lawyers just to make it sound official. And then came the cherry on top. She scheduled an emergency board meeting to clarify the misinformation being spread online. Translation, she wanted to clean up the mess before the county auditors or law enforcement got involved. I wasn't intimidated, but I knew what she was doing. She was trying to flip the narrative, paint herself as the victim, the misunderstood leader who had been sabotaged by a disgruntled resident. But I wasn't just some random resident anymore. At this point, I had evidence, witnesses, and about 3,000 people watching the replay of the live stream. So I did what any good tech nerd would do. I backed everything up. Every file, every timestamp, every line of metadata that proved what she'd done. And then I started digging deeper. See, when someone like Karen gets cornered, they always leave trails. And sure enough, she did. In one of the archived folders, buried deep inside a mislabeled directory, I found something jaw-dropping. A spreadsheet called Projected Allocations 2026. It was basically her future plan, all the upcoming budgets, already pre-filled with adjusted numbers and personal reimbursements. It even had categories like community outreach that were really just excuses for new furniture, catered dinners, and even a leadership cruise. A leadership cruise. Paid for by the HOA dues of 142 families. I almost laughed out loud. The woman had basically turned suburban governance into a luxury lifestyle plan. But here's where things got tricky. Technically, she wasn't wrong. Yet. The future budgets hadn't been approved, so I couldn't expose her plans the same way I'd exposed her past. If I wanted to really end this, I needed to make sure she couldn't spin it back on me. The emergency board meeting was my chance, and trust me, Karen made sure it was dramatic. She came in with printed legal papers, color-coded binders, and that same red blazer, her armor of fake authority. The auditor wasn't there this time. Rumor had it he'd already been advised by his firm to take a leave of absence. So Karen stood alone, surrounded by board members who looked just about ready to resign on the spot. She opened the meeting with her usual flair, talking about how misinformation spreads faster than facts, how people misinterpret community leadership, and how online leaks had caused emotional distress to her and her family. Meanwhile, my phone was live streaming the whole thing again. This time, we had twice as many viewers. I waited until she was deep into her monologue before standing up and connecting my laptop to the projector again. I could feel her glare stabbing through me. But I didn't care, because this time I wasn't just showing one document. I had compiled a timeline, every edit, every deleted entry, every payment she made to herself disguised as a vendor cost. And then I dropped the bomb. A short video montage I had made showing her email history, complete with the consulting bonus messages to the auditor. You could hear the gasps ripple through the room. The vice president of the board immediately called for a motion to suspend Karen pending investigation. The crowd practically applauded, and Karen? She just stood there, trembling with rage, muttering something about defamation and legal consequences. But the funniest part? The local news station picked up the story within hours. Apparently, someone from the live stream chat had forwarded the link. By the next morning, the headline read, HOA president accused of budget fraud, live streamed by resident. Karen's face was right there on the homepage. No filters, no control, no spin. I thought that would be the end of it, the grand finale, but I underestimated her. Because while the rest of us were celebrating transparency and justice, Karen was plotting her comeback. And it came faster than anyone expected. 2 days later, I woke up to find a letter taped to my door, a bright pink envelope sealed with a community logo. Inside was a formal notice of HOA violation. Apparently, my live stream activities were a breach of privacy and a disruption of community order. Oh, and they were fining me $500. $500 for exposing her fraud. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore, this was a power game. And Karen was trying to use the same system she built to punish me for tearing it down. I wasn't going to let that happen. If she wanted to fight with bureaucracy, I was going to fight with truth. And this time, I wasn't going to do it alone. Because now, the entire neighborhood was on my side. People who had stayed silent for years were finally speaking up, filing complaints, gathering evidence, and demanding an emergency election to replace her. Even the county's regulatory office had started sniffing around, requesting all HOA financials from the past 5 years. Karen had lost control, but she didn't know it yet. The next meeting would decide everything. Her position, the investigation, and maybe even her future, and I had one more trick up my sleeve, something she'd never see coming. Because while she was busy writing violation notices and pretending to be untouchable, I had discovered something hidden deep in the auditor's cloud drive, something that would end her reign once and for all. If you've ever gone up against someone like Karen, you know one thing for sure. They never back down quietly. They don't apologize. They retaliate. And by the time I woke up to my second HOA violation notice that week, I knew she was getting desperate. This one was even pettier than the first. Apparently, my trash bins were not aligned with community standards. Yeah, because clearly that's the biggest problem in a neighborhood where the president is committing financial fraud. I laughed it off, but I also knew what this meant. Karen wasn't just lashing out, she was trying to build a paper trail, a fake record to make me look like the problem resident, the rebel, the one she could claim was harassing the board. The irony was almost beautiful. She was trying to use her own system of control to take me down. But what she didn't know was that I had found something that would make all her little violations look like child's play. That file I mentioned, the one buried deep in the auditor's old cloud drive. Yeah, it wasn't just another spreadsheet, it was a full-blown report. A private correspondence between Karen and the auditor's firm, complete with messages, scanned receipts, and audio memos. Apparently, the auditor had backed up everything for his records. And he had no idea it was still syncing to his old shared folder. Lucky for me, one of the links he'd used was public by mistake, completely legal to access, and very, very revealing. Inside that folder was a chain of messages where Karen discussed exactly how she'd manipulate the books. There were notes like, "Round this down to 4K, no one checks minor categories," and "Add fake receipt to offset maintenance cost." She literally gave him step-by-step instructions on how to commit budget fraud. But that wasn't even the craziest part. In one of the audio memos, she bragged about how the homeowners are too lazy to care, and that, as long as the grass stays trimmed, no one questions the money. Oh, and she also mentioned me, by name. Apparently, she had been planning to keep an eye on me, ever since I'd first questioned her years ago about that pool renovation cost. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just corruption, it was personal. So yeah, by the time the final HOA emergency meeting rolled around, I wasn't just showing up to defend myself, I was there to end the entire charade once and for all. The meeting was held in the community hall. Same dull beige walls, same folding chairs, same fake sense of order that Karen always used to control everyone. But this time, it felt different. The room was packed. Dozens of neighbors, cameras, local reporters, even a representative from the county oversight committee. Karen looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her red blazer had been replaced by a plain gray jacket, probably the most humble outfit she owned. She opened the meeting with a speech about moving forward with unity and learning from misunderstandings. It was a masterclass in fake sincerity. If you didn't know her history, you might have even believed it. But everyone in that room did know, and they weren't buying it. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the projector again. At this point, it had almost become a tradition, me versus the queen of the HOA. I plugged in my laptop, took a deep breath, and said nothing. I just hit play. The first thing that played was the audio memo. Karen's voice, crystal clear, laughing about how she could adjust budgets without anyone noticing. You could feel the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. People turned in their seats. Even the board members looked disgusted. Then I switched to the screenshots, the emails between her and the auditor, and finally, the kicker. A PDF of a wire transfer from the HOA account to a company registered under her husband's name. The description line? Event catering, but there had never been an event. The room erupted. Voices everywhere, gasps, outrage, people demanding her resignation on the spot. Karen tried to shout over them, her face turning bright red, her words trembling with panic. She pointed at me, yelling about privacy breaches, illegal hacking, and defamation. The same tired script she'd been using since the first live stream. But this time, nobody listened. The county representative stood up, motioned for silence, and calmly said the words everyone had been waiting for. The HOA president is hereby suspended, pending full investigation. You could practically hear the relief spread through the room. People clapped, some even cheered. Karen just stood there, frozen, defeated, staring at the floor as the weight of her little empire collapsed around her. For once, she wasn't in control. And for the first time since I'd moved into this neighborhood, the HOA actually felt like a community again, not a monarchy. But the story didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, investigators dug deep into the HOA's records. They found thousands of dollars in misplaced funds, bogus contracts, and personal reimbursements. The auditor was disbarred from his professional association, and Karen, well, she ended up stepping down before the legal storm hit full force. Word around the neighborhood was that she sold her house quietly and moved 2 towns over. And me? I got a call from the oversight committee asking if I'd consider joining the new board. Honestly, I laughed. After everything that happened, the last thing I wanted was to be the next Karen with a clipboard. But I did agree to one thing: setting up a digital transparency portal for the new board. Every budget, every receipt, every report uploaded publicly for all residents to see. No secrets, no manipulation, just pure accountability. And every time I log into that system now, I see the little folder labeled Audit Review. I left it there as a reminder, the same folder that started it all, a piece of digital history. Sometimes I think about Karen, how she probably still believes she did nothing wrong, how she'll probably try to join another HOA somewhere else and start her empire again. But not here. Not anymore. Because this neighborhood finally learned that the best way to handle a power-hungry Karen is to shine a light on every single one of her secrets. And when you do that, no amount of fake smiles or red blazers can save her.